Previously on Icy Sea Bass. This is some of the strongest character development I've ever seen in a kids show. Am I alone in finding this to be insufferably tone deaf? They just met her! No she's not looking for a boyfriend? When I'm in a no self-awareness competition and my opponent is... But hey, whatever it takes to pitch that pandering spinoff, am I right? Totally in good faith. Hey, how'd it go with your third season? Sí, merecido. So yeah, hopefully y'all can understand why I've held this episode in so much contempt for a while now. However, even with the toxicity, the stereotyping, the pandering, and the misunderstanding of real romantic connections, even with how unapologetic this narrative seems about it all, maybe I would have appreciated it if ideally it had just committed to what it should have been building up to. Well guys, I've made it no secret that, especially as a native Mexican, I mostly dislike the Casa Grandes as a series. I said mostly, but believe it or not, there was a time where I respected it when you take everything we eventually learn about their lead into account. Amidst how forced, rushed, and just downright badly written the romance between Ronnie Ann and Lincoln was, and still is, you could at least understand where she was coming from in the beginning. She was troubled, she was brooding, she was implied to be a lonely school bully, even after meeting him to some extent. And her behavior checks out. Her parents are divorced, her mom's a full-time nurse, her dad works long distance, to where you get why she tries so hard to get him to stay when he visits. And then comes her brother. She spent most of her life looking up to him, as we learn, but nowadays, he's busy most of the time, either by his countless jobs or by his girlfriend. By the looks of it, Ronnie Ann was supportive how she could be, but from a psychological standpoint, it would eat away at her. So when she started picking on said girlfriend's brother, it shouldn't be condoned, even though the narrative kinda does, but you understand her motivations. It's easy for her to surmise that if this loud sister can make her brother so happy, even at her own expense, then maybe the loud brother could do the same for her. For an 11-year-old girl without much of a social circle, or even family to turn to, you get why she went about befriending him the wrong way. Behind that tomboyish and abusive attitude, she was desperate, she was naive, but most of all, she felt alone. So you get why Lincoln was so distrusting of her when they were assigned to just guard an egg, until he sees what she's like at home amidst her embarrassment, because that's all she's ever shown in his eyes. And to my surprise, there were even more layers to this character. Even with how episodic to a fault this franchise is, these characters had a well-executed and surprisingly platonic story arc. Yeah, you heard me. Platonic. When Ronnie Ann and Bobby go visit their extended family, whose name alone already contradicts canon.
Lori, what is Bobby's full name?
Roberto Alejandro Martinez Mian Luis Santiago Jr.
Yeah, totally planned from the start, eh? You come to certain realizations. Even with how little we knew about their mom, you get why she set up this whole visit in hopes of moving to a new home. She wants her daughter to stay somewhere where she doesn't feel so misguided. And she probably deduced, either through her own perception or through Bobby's, the latter of which would explain his earlier behavior, that if her daughter kept hinging on this one boy the way she has, it'd just be too codependent for its own good. And she more or less implied it herself.
Ronnie Ann, Bobby, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I hate that you guys have to be alone so much, and we have this great family here. I thought maybe we could move here? What do you guys think?
She's 11. If she ever really was, she shouldn't be yearning for romance so eagerly. At least, not like this. So even when this visit turned out to be miserable for Ronnie Ann, you get why she's willing to adapt when she sees how they poured their hearts out into forming her bedroom. And then comes, oh hey, an affectionate moment with Lincoln that was actually earned. However, there's one element that really set Ronnie Ann apart from the other toxic love interests for me. Although to be fair, the bar wasn't really that high. Most of her development, her story arc, her character, It's conveyed mostly through subtext, but it's not so hidden to where you don't understand her. And unlike another Nickelodeon girl, the narrative isn't fishing for sympathy. No therapy session, no overselling a tragic backstory, no developed obsession. The narrative doesn't try to make excuses for its mistakes or anyone's bad behavior. It just seemingly owns up to it. Just take a moment to think about that one hug real quick. She'll be living 3 hours away and doing her own thing, far away from the boy she always leaned on. He immediately thinks she's just gonna punch his shoulder and it's gonna hurt, only to get something he's never gotten out of her before. For once she was being legitimately affectionate. Almost as if she now believed that change is coming because things needed to be different. She needed to be different. Almost as if this is her way of saying, thank you for putting up with me, but you deserve someone better. Later on, Lincoln shows that he misses her company, but he's not grieving a breakup like his friends think because was there anything to break up from in the first place?
She is not my girlfriend!
Furthermore, a girl he actually likes that way comes along, and our protagonist's character development is at its own strongest point. Initially, he pretends to be a tough guy to win her over. I wonder who he got that idea from. He distrusts his sister's interference, for good reason. He hides himself, he starts having nightmares, and the self-proclaimed man with the plan feels completely panicked and lost. Only to eventually at least see that his sisters learned their lesson from last time. Through all the girls in his life, family or friend, he realizes he was always good enough. He didn't need to be forced into it. He always believed that for his sisters, as we saw with Lucy, but even with how cocky he is sometimes, I wouldn't put it beneath him to doubt that for himself. And then you take the girl in question into account. Even with how much screen time they were screwed out of together for one reason or another, it's crazy how well their personalities work off of each other. He takes pride in his planning, her approach is more gentle. He wears his confidence to where he overthinks, and we see that now, while she struggles with having it at the best of times. One is ambitious and a bit sneaky, the other is spontaneous, yet also earnest. Wow, they really are just Robin and Cordelia.
Flashback.
White hair, a knack for planning, an official gender bent design, and a severed connection with an unholy monster. Okay.
End of flashback.
Bro has spent his whole life dealing with girls that drive him crazy in the best, but also the worst of ways. So in retrospect, it makes sense that the one he falls in love with, of his own accord, to simply bring out the best in him. Literally without even being on screen. And if these writers would have tried, the same could have been said for her. Instead of the next Arnold and Helga, we could have had the next Phineas and Isabella, or the next Peter and Mary J. No, not that one. There you go. That's why all the cumulative encouragement in White Hair is all the more emotionally meaningful. The Loud Sisters weren't just hyping him up. They truly believe in what they're saying because we as the audience have seen what they're talking about firsthand. Not to mention, I say it's a spiritual follow-up to the best episode of Season 1. What he's learned, who he bonds with, not only did it all save his life, it also showed how far you can go when you spend time with your loved ones. How far the joy and support will take you when you do it for those that matter. Who you become and who you grow into. If I may reiterate from an older video, what should be the most fundamental principle of any good family, especially one this big? Love. Love between them, and love that we could have seen be passed on from what our protagonist learns, what he thinks, what he does, who he does it for, willingly, who he is, and seeing how it guides him in a future this innocent 12-year-old boy would believably seek. Love that feels real. And well, what better way to represent the very soul of this series? Both who he is and who he loves was seemingly going to be taken a step further. We have witnessed who Lincoln is as a character, as a brother, and as a friend. So maybe at this point, it was time for something a little bigger than that. This one simple moment of encouragement seemed like the least his sisters could do for him. To support him in return, and to do it well this time. Not simply because, oh my gosh, my brother has a girlfriend! All that zaniness, all those interactions, even the bad ones, all those sacrifices, it felt like it wasn't just there to entertain an audience or make money. For a change, it felt like it was just there to tell a meaningful story for our main character. A story of love, realization, and understanding your self-worth. This is L is for Love done right. No repetitive montages, no retcons, no agendas, no character derailment. Well, not yet. Just pure, authentic storytelling that matches the character in question, with his own history backing it up. I would be questioning why an 11-year-old is thinking this far ahead about his love life, but then it hit me. Man with a plan. Thinking far ahead is his whole thing. So maybe this time it shouldn't backfire for a change. The evidence just kept piling on that it was literally meant to be. Case in point, even that kiss with Ronnie Ann just felt more and more consolatory than romantic as time went on. She straight up admits to not liking Lincoln that way, or presumably not anymore. Eventually she made more friends she could be honest with. She made another best friend without abusive methods. She even made a friend who was treated like a punching bag who maybe needed some sympathy instead. Kind of like the friend she used to mistreat the same way. And it shows when even her pranking tendencies against Lincoln were turned into a playful game between them. The episode still has a lot of problems, but the notion is worth appreciating. It's almost as if living in a place surrounded by people who care about her probably made her realize that maybe too much was hinging on Lincoln. It might not be as simple as she gets older, but that's what makes some of these connections all the more important. As for Lincoln, well, again, I had no reason to believe that he liked her that way in the first place. There's no denying that they mean a lot to each other, just not in the way that they expected. Or really, everyone expected. Both characters served as important stepping stones for each other's lives, but that didn't stop them from caring about one another, even if they realized they don't have to, nor want to be together. And well, I think that's legitimately beautiful. Honestly, with this kind of growth, I would have been sold on a spin-off with her as the lead. But unfortunately, all of this is probably the biggest fluke of emotional brilliance I've ever seen in fiction. Because how exactly did things play out with the Casagrandes? Half of their plot lines aren't even about the lead. Most of what is doesn't bother evolving characters. Most of her cast is just boring or just the worst. The punching bag stays a punching bag, a rehash of the worst Loud House episode. All the while, hey, we need an episode about quinceañeras, tamales, lucha libre, Dia de Muertos. Actually, that one's not so bad. Telenovelas, Discount Chicharito, a Walter Mercado knockoff that's even more of a fraud than the real one. Wait a minute, he's not even Mexican! A whole grab bag of every scrap of my culture they could get their hands on to save face. Oh, that's not a jab at the production, that's actually the characters' mission. A half-baked friendship with the Louds because, hey, look how buddy-buddy we are, please go watch our failing spin-off. And icing on the slop cake, a bunch of unfunny chancla jokes, and hey, even a whole episode about that.
This is the most obnoxious thing I've ever experienced in my life.
This show does to Mexican culture what Legendary did with Detective Pikachu. They didn't really research. It legitimately feels like they skimmed through Wikipedia entries and called it a day. Am I crazy? Or is this just the Mexican equivalent of Captain Durag? No, wait, they also have their own stereotypical superhero. And I guess Lincoln and Ronnie Ann are being shoved together right under our noses anyways, because otherwise, what's the point of a nod like this? And when the spin-off has a chance to maybe tie some loose ends after a cancellation, what do we get instead? The lead's best friend and the only likable new character has like 30 seconds of screen time, a plot about some random gods we didn't even know existed until now, Hooray, more fantasy crap. That works so well for the other guys. Oh, and an arc between Ronnie and her mom that doesn't match either of them whatsoever. It's her birthday and she already has plans, but screw it! Surprise vacation to Mexico! Sorry, not optional. And somehow, Ronnie Ann is painted as part of the problem when she's not happy about it. It's not like her mom has ever been considerate to where it sparked most of her character growth in the first place! What next? You're gonna tell me the villain is defeated by a chanca? Oh my gosh! I was joking, no me frieguen. ¿Qué andan fumando estos güeyes sinvergüenzas? ¿A esto le llaman comedia? ¿Qué es esta basura desinspirada? Is this their idea of closure? Is there any passion for emotional comprehension in this production? What type of nacho taco chimichanga crap is this? Are they just constantly getting high off of working with anything remotely unconventional or exotic? Do they just see us Mexicans as this blithering monolith of a country? Is that why we have so many boring fantasy elements? Is that why Lincoln's growing bond with another girl and their character development were derailed? Because what? All you really cared about was more representation? Hooray, we got a Filipina too. Was this really the grand vision? I too take deep dives into my lead psyche, pay homage to his beginnings as a symbol of progress, and peak his development for what's ultimately meant to be just another diversity token. I too convey a boy's feelings for a girl exceptionally, and then I pretend they were as shallow as the rest of his friends, including his best friend supporting him in the process. What, did I think they were telling a love story with real chemistry and no toxicity for a change? While redeeming the previous one? Nah, they just needed another minority girl. Why do you think Girl Jordan fell to irrelevance as soon as she showed up? And for good measure, just like with some of their worst episodes, cram in some more stereotypes that border on identity politics. You heard her, boys. If she's friendly, you'll assume she likes one of you, no matter how much it contradicts your character development or the continuity. And shame on you guys for believing it. Let's pretend all of the emotions and ideas from their predecessor, and arguably the best episode in the whole franchise, meant absolutely nothing. It's honestly crazy how much we were smothered with missed opportunities. Remember how I said Stella lacked confidence at the best of times? How did that play out exactly? She could have had a heart-to-heart with her best friend from when he struggled with confidence, especially since it involved her. But instead, it's some boring anecdote from a character nobody gives a crap about. Remember the Valentine's dance? No offense to Clyde, because the writers screwed him and Chloe too, but why was this not about Lincoln being worried about asking out Stella? Given the history, wouldn't it have made a lot more sense if he was the one who was reluctant about asking out a girl? Especially this one in particular? Last time, it almost cost him all of his friends, including her. But nah, he's dead set on the Latina because she was here first, I guess.
Well, you know what?
I'm sorry, guys. I hate to keep being so cynical, but it all just makes too much sense in the worst of ways. How did we go from some of the most brilliant writing the show ever had, then right back to its traditional stupidity? They really couldn't let this whole spin-off's identity be summed up with anything other than Mexicano and, oh, right, the other lead's love interest. Screw the one that the narrative was building towards better, I guess. For how much supposed inspiration they claim to take, La Casa Grandes is not entertaining, it's not funny or stylized like El Tigre, even with its creator involved sometimes. No real educational purposes like with Dora. All it really had going for it was its character progression, and they just tossed it away. And that's the problem here. They treated something like everything, and treated everything like nothing. And for what? Would the McBrides lose any sense of character if one of them was a woman?
No!
Their writer might tell you otherwise, and yet the last time he tried gender bending, most people hated it for all the right reasons. They didn't lose it. He wrote it out and relegated them to stereotypes. Because apparently the message is, you're better off with girls than with boys, or something. I really don't see how to put a positive spin on this. and it wouldn't be the first time coming from him. Would Sam and Luna's relationship be any less forced and bland if she really was a guy? No, but they're not the ones getting split up off screen or forgotten. Would I be any less invested in the dynamic between Lincoln and Stella if she wasn't Filipina?
Of course not.
Would the Casagrandes ever have been greenlit, let alone pitched, if their lead wasn't race swapped at the last second? Would any of Ronnie Ann's real character development be any different if her family's ethnicity was any different? Piensa con cuidado si vas a contestar eso. It's almost as if any attempt at flaunting diversity, no matter how small, is hardly secondary to genuine appeal, real artistry, or good storytelling. And yet here, the idea alone was treated like a crowning achievement. So I'll say one thing as part of a group they insisted on representing. Esto es patético. If this is how they go at it, then they deserve to bomb after the first season. Which they did, but they had to keep dragging the corpse for as long as they could. If I may quote one of my favorite Fire Emblem characters,
What a load of bunk it is, pretending to serve a corpse. You're serving your own ego.
but maybe all of this wouldn't bother me so much if it wasn't responsible for the most botched emotional storyline in this. No, not that one. Keep scrolling. Nope.
She doesn't even go here.
Nope. Okay, what does it say when there's that many examples? There you go. I have never seen a more uninspired, boring, wasteful, disingenuous, insulting, artistically bankrupt excuse of a spin-off waste so much emotional depth in a franchise just to be so self-indulgent. And it all started with this one terrible episode. Well, partially. For such a seemingly silly franchise, there was a time where it was capable of so much more than just decent slapstick. Even amidst a handful of writing problems, there was so much heart on par with some of Nickelodeon's best work. At least by its own standards. I genuinely do ponder, would this show have so much of what it's notoriously known for had they not screwed this up? Would Lincoln, say, be shipped with every female that breeds, to put it lightly, had they just ideally locked in with Stella's character? Would there be so many depictions of unhealthy relationships if there was a healthy one? Maybe I would stop judging this show for what it isn't, if what it's become didn't feel like such a joke. You know, for how hard they try to distance themselves from Savino's legacy, they really seem to be ignoring the ideal way to go at it. Even though he introduced her, he wasn't on board with Stella in the right ways for whatever reason. Even if that wasn't the case though, I firmly believe this is the kind of storyline that would warrant a whole 1-hour special or maybe even a movie. Especially for the show's genre. Not the dragon, not the aliens, not the secret agents, and definitely not the evil Santa. There's really no shame in being so mundane, and yet to this staff, it seems impossible in a larger context. Much like Lincoln, there was a time where this series was already good enough. It never had to make what it thought it had to, because something better was there all along. But it is what it is. Shame on me for believing that these shows could have been better than what they ever were. I guess when you're dragging on for 10 seasons, you don't have to try to be like the greats in any way you could still be. When even fanfiction can get it right, especially in this community, you know you failed. So I'll leave it at this. This show needs to end, Stellican is based, and somebody in charge should really stop thinking with their wallet. Gracias y buen día.